Welcome back to Ministers in the Making. This is John Carolus with my co-host, Paul Horstmeyer. Today we have a special treat for all the listeners. We've got our own Dr. Saleska in the booth with us today. So thank you, Dr. Saleska, for coming and being a part of the show today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for asking me, actually.
And so we are looking forward to hearing from you about the seminary, your own experience, who you are. So I guess we'll start there. Can you tell us a little bit about who Dr. Saleska is and what he does?
Now, that's a big question, so I'll kind of narrow things
That's
down.
true, yeah.
I am this guy that just through the blessing of the Lord has ended up in this place. My dad used to teach at St. John's College, which is where I grew up in Winfield, Kansas. His dad was a pastor in Venity, Illinois, and then later actually was a librarian here at the seminary, and his picture is actually up on the wall in Ben Haupt's office, or it was before the renovation.
Oh, wow.
So I come from a long line of Lutherans.
Legacy family.
Legacy family. My wife, too, Brower Hall, is actually named after, her maiden name is Brower, so after her, I think it was her great-grandfather.
Wow. Deep
he
connections.
was one of the 10 original members of the Lutheran Laymen's League, which was started to support pastors in their ministry, and the families of those who had retired. So I kind of in high school decided to become a pastor, went to St. John's College, went my last 2 years to Concordia, Ann Arbor, and then came here to the seminary and graduated in 1982. I was a pastor in Cincinnati for 13 years. Went to Hebrew Union College there when I was being a pastor. Then I was 2 years at St. Paul's in Napoleon, Ohio, before I came to the seminary in 1997. And so that's kind of who I am, just this guy that somehow the Lord opened these doors. And sometimes I kind of look back and I go, I don't know how this happened, because I am the kind of guy that likes to goof off way too much for the stereotypical professor here. So I teach Old Testament. That's what I love. I've always loved to teach the Scriptures to people in parish ministry. I really worked hard on that. I still do in my classes. Specifically, I teach the Psalms class. I just finished and just put in to CPH the commentary on the first 50 Psalms for the CPH commentary, and that's going to be edited starting next year. So hopefully in a couple of years that will be out, which was a major project for me.
I bet.
I praise the Lord when I was done, because like I said, I like to goof off more than sit down and write. So I do that. I teach Old Testament. I'm also the Dean of Ministerial Formation, which basically means I oversee all our formation programs here, both the ones on campus and our distant ones like the EEIIT program, the SMP, Center for Hispanic Studies. Those programs are all in my purview, and I work with great directors and colleagues and staff. We just have a tremendous staff and team here that's a joy for me to work with. And then, of course, the third thing I do is coach the preachers basketball team. I've been doing that for 10 years.
Yeah.
My pastor, Ron Rawl, is the assistant coach, and the Lord has blessed us with Dr. Nafsker, a younger guy who used to play for the preachers, who is also helping me as an assistant. So I'm very thankful for that, because it will help ensure that legacy of the preachers basketball continues when I get to step out of that role. So I'm very thankful to be able to do all three of those things at the seminary. That's a little bit about who I am, especially in the official sphere, so to speak.
Yeah, thanks for that picture. So as far as the certification information process and you being sort of the overseer of a lot of those things, what does that mean for a student?
What it means for a student, what you can expect as a student, and what we have been working very hard to be for the last couple of years, I think it's really important, more than a couple of years, because it was started even before I became dean, is to be very transparent in the way that we help in a student's formation. So one thing we try to do is think very holistically about a student who's studying for the pastoral ministry or for the ministry of being a deaconess. It used to be that the seminary was just this kind of cognitive academic place where you learn information or learn theology. And that's still very true. We have great professors. Some of my colleagues just amaze me with their knowledge and understanding of theology. They just have this deep knowledge of it and love of it. And I learn so much from them every day. But another thing that we've become much more intentional in is this other part, the relational aspects that are so important in pastoral ministry, the leadership aspects, the personal, affective aspects. What is a minister's heart really like? How do we form a person to be a good leader, to know appropriate boundaries, to have a strong family, to be a great husband and father as well as a pastor? How do you lead a congregation? How do you begin to help a congregation see its mission in the neighborhood in which they are put, so they not only have inward-looking eyes, but how do you serve your neighbor? How do you love your neighbor appropriately? How do you think creatively about ways to do that where God is going to place you as a pastor? Those are all things that are really dear to my heart and of interest to me. So when a student comes here, they can expect that they're going to be challenged in those areas. They're going to be formed in those areas. We are here to support them, not penalize them. We are here to help them think very deeply about their own formation, become more self-aware of who they are. There's that old saying, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. So sometimes the outside perspective that we're able to bring to students' formation can be very helpful to them. And we get a lot of these aha moments, which, I didn't know that's how I was coming across to people, or I didn't know that about myself, or, I knew that about myself, but I don't know what to do with it. So we now have developed in our curriculum intentional long-term ways to deal with that in a gospel-centered, grace-centered, structured way, not law-centered, not punitive-oriented, not threatening. And I'm just very pleased and happy to be able to be a part of that. And any student who comes here, when they realize what's happening, if they're at all teachable, they really resonate with it. And they're very, very thankful for that, because they know that when they get out into the ministry, they're going to be prepared to be faithful proclaimers of God's word and the gospel, and be able to lead their people in positive ways, so that throughout their ministry they find just great joy in what they do. It always hurts me when I hear pastors who don't have any joy in their ministry, in their life, who face these obstacles and don't know how to deal with them. And hopefully we're equipping pastors and students to be able to do that, deaconesses too.
Yeah, no, and John and I have talked about a few times, even here on the podcast, of how we've really appreciated how it seems like all the professors really are sort of one mind with wanting to make sure that we, succeed and are faithful and are, really thriving in ministry. And could you maybe give a couple examples of how, like, practically and like the concrete ways that your goal and vision for sort of the formation is reflected, like in what the students will do?
So a big part of our curriculum now is the personal and spiritual formation groups that we have. In our new curriculum, we actually have 8 outcomes that deal with personal and spiritual formation. And I can name you a few, like relational health, physical health, emotional health, intellectual health. Those are the kinds of issues that are hard for us to get at because they're more intangible. So this, I really have to stress, is unique among seminaries. There may be one other seminary in another denomination that does something like what we do, but no one to this extent. Before a student even gets on campus, they are divided into mentoring groups, as we call them, of 5 or 6 students who they will be with for their entire seminary career. So already at orientation, we start this off with them. They take a self-assessment before they get to the seminary. And so we mix up different personalities in the groups because it models what they will see out in ministry in their pastoral conferences and all those kinds of things. The groups then will meet weekly throughout their seminary career. Even on vicarage, we're trying to set something up in which they'll be able to do some online things together. And all of those groups then will be mentored by professors, by my colleagues, who themselves are being trained by an outside person who is teaching us how to go into a coaching, mentoring mode with them. I got to stress that that's different than being a teaching mode in which we are all used to being the advice givers. the ones that download information to students, that kind of a student-teacher relationship that everyone's familiar with. But a coaching-mentor relationship is different in that rather than just kind of giving people's advice, we help them explore who they are, help them explore their own solutions to issues or questions that they have. The students then meet together as they develop their own personal development plans and help hold each other accountable to the goals that they set for their own personal formation. They pray together, they confess together, they grow closer in their relationships, so that through their time here at the seminary, they become very self-aware of what their issues are, what their strengths are, what they need to be aware of. They hopefully will grow in their ability to relate to people who disagree with them, who are very different personalities to them. And we're very hopeful that this formation that they have will carry over into the way they do pastoral ministry, so that when they become leaders out there, they will be collaborative, they will be able to listen to other people, they will be able to deal in positive constructive ways with issues that come up or disagreements, conflicts, those kinds of things, and be able to do that in a healthy way that builds congregations rather than destroys them.
Yeah, so it goes a little deeper than just taking what maybe had sort of an academic stereotype and turning it into more of a practical thing, but it really is a lot more personally focused and aimed at making better pastors.
John, I'm really glad you said that, because it's so easy to dismiss what I just said as, oh, that's just practical stuff. Because it's much more than that. It's not like a class in which you sit there and the prof tells you about these things. It is much deeper, so much deeper than that, in that students actually have the opportunity to reflect deeply on the issues that we want them to value and work through very intentionally on how to do that. So it's not just, quotes, practical, separated from systematic or exegetical or historical theology, because in the mentor groups, those mentor groups touch on all aspects of their formation, including what we would think of as the more, quotes, traditional streams of a seminary education. So, people who just say, oh, that's just practical training that they're getting, are really short-sheeting what we are all about here and what the new curriculum is all about. Yeah, thanks for actually helping me to make that distinction, because it's an important one, I think.
Yeah, and maybe just kind of one more thought or question for this segment of things. I know that over the past couple of years, there's been sort of some pilot groups going through the early models of this, curriculum change, and now Paul and I, as second years, have kind of seen the whole thing turn over into being more normalized. Mm-hmm. What positive things have you seen from some of those changes now being made generally to the whole population?
Thanks for that. Good. To kind of just fill in a little what John was saying, before we did this in the new curriculum, we had 2 years pilot program. For 2 years ago, a segment of students, about 25 or so, and last year as well, went through a similar mentor group process that was headed by Dr. Jason Brogy, who did his PhD actually in this kind of spiritual formation, educational formation aspect. All of those students, then we did an assessment on those 2 years by interviewing each student individually a couple of times at least, maybe more, and finding out from their feedback what was good, what needed improvement, what would be helpful. And we had an overwhelmingly positive response from that. We've also had an overwhelmingly positive response from the health and wellness of the International Center, Grace Place, Doxology, all these places that deal in ministerial health, helped us in the formation of the process that we want students to go through. So we've been partnering with people outside of the institution in our synod at large from all spectrums so that we can have a strong and transparent process as possible. So we took all that information into consideration in designing the new curriculum. It's still in process. We're still working to improve it. So we have a continual assessment process in which at the end of every semester we sit down as a group of mentors and teachers and debrief what went well, what we need to improve, and that will continue in the future of the new curriculum. It's kind of built in so that we continue to listen to other people very carefully and then are able to be flexible enough to make adjustments to address issues and questions that will come up in the future that we may not even know about right now.
Great. Well, thank you. So if you don't mind kind of thinking back to your own formational years at seminary.
Okay.
And telling us a little bit about how, the general way of things was kind of then for you and the other students in your classes and those surrounding them, and how things have maybe been progressing.
So that is a big change from when I went through. All of this is a big change. When I went through from 1978 through 82, and if you remember, the walkout was in 1974, and so we were one of the first, I think we were the biggest class to matriculate to St. Louis after the walkout. And in our education, it was much more the training that people who've been in ministry 30, 40, 50 years are familiar with. The things that I've been talking about were more taken for granted. And part of that was because there was a system that students went through from high school through until they got to the SEM, so that they had been with each other for a number of years and knew each other.
Sure.
But nevertheless, these kinds of issues would be taken care of in a much less transparent way. So there was this, if you get called to the dean, you're in trouble. And if issues came up, you tried to either jump through hoops or fly under the radar. Because there was no real positive, constructive way to deal with formation issues right from the get-go. If issues came up on vicarage or RFE, notice how late that is in a person's formation to really provide help to them. And so you would do kind of patch work and Band-Aid work and hope they'd be all right. Well, that's really inadequate for today's culture. As you know, the numbers in our Missouri Synod are declining. It's aging. I mean, we have a lot of challenges out there. And so how do you help guys have healthy, beautiful ministries, grace-centered, where the power of the Holy Spirit is working through the gospel in people and bringing people into Jesus? You need to be much more intentional about these other things. We'd gathered a lot of data, and from the data we gathered from district presidents, from other churches, the problem that congregations are having is not with the theology of their students. By and large, they are very happy with the theology that our students come out with. They come out with a deep knowledge of Lutheran theology and a deep appreciation for it. The problem is with these other issues. They don't know how to lead. They don't know proper boundaries. They don't know how to form effective relationships with people. Their finances are all messed up, and they don't know how to do any of that. So they don't take care of themselves. All of those things are very, very important for us in this day and age, and so we want to try to address those. So, that's a big difference that anyone from the old school who comes to this campus and spends time here from our orientation on will see. A lot of guys who mentor SMP students come to our orientation and go, man, this is really different than what it was when we went through. And they're very, very happy, actually, extremely happy to see that.
Yeah, it seems like you guys are really taking seriously the issues that are out there.
Yeah. And
I think we all kind of know it. A guy could be really great or brilliant, and then something crumbles with his family or his personal life falls apart, and it was the weak link that made it all crumble, and it's really sad. And so, I know we're both, speaking on behalf of all the students, so thankful that you guys are taking these things seriously, not just letting us sort of try and sit on the conveyor belt and just wait till graduation day or anything. You want us to really be molded and shaped in the right ways. So kind of thinking, for the student that might be considering, trying to discern whether, he'd have a place here and want to pursue ministry. What are the kinds of the things that you could tell him, we've heard kind of what he could expect or she could expect, but maybe what are the things that, they could start thinking about right now in that whole decision?
Okay, so that can be a broad-ranging question depending on where you are in your life. If you are a young person, let's say you're in middle school or high school or even college and considering it, then one of the things I would say is that there's no need to major in theology. If you're thinking about a major, pick something you love, and it can be anything from literature to science to political science to English to history. Avail yourself of all of those things because it gives you a breadth of knowledge. And then I would say open yourself up to experiences with other people and other cultures that might make you feel uncomfortable, that you're unfamiliar with. Because, again, that broadens the perspective that you will bring with you to the seminary. It broadens your life experience. So don't be afraid to volunteer for things, to get involved in things. Let's just say, I've never been in a play or I've never acted or been part of something like that, but there's something that intrigues you about it. Well, go ahead and do it and try that. Hey, there's some need outside in the community. How do I get involved in that? Involving yourself in those kinds of experiences will prepare you for ministry. They'll prepare you, but what's great about them is that they'll prepare you for life, even if you decide not to come to the seminary and be a pastor. It will deepen your ability to make relationships and cross boundaries that you haven't formerly crossed. So think academically about something you love, but also think more experientially. For a second career person that has had a lot of experiences, one of the ways to get ready for the seminary is to think about what experiences you valued and what experiences that you might need or want, and start down that path. Most of you have been to college already, so thinking more intentionally about, okay, I haven't studied languages for a while. How do I begin to grapple with that aspect? One of the great things about our new curriculum is that Greek and Hebrew are now part of the curriculum rather than prerequisites.
Right.
So it enables students to come here and learn those at a more gradual pace. That's another exciting thing about our curriculum. On the academic side, which I'm very excited about because I'm a Hebrew guy, okay? Love Old Testament, love Hebrew. That rather than slogging through 10 weeks of Greek and 10 weeks of Hebrew and then starting the seminary, they can take Greek at a slower pace and Hebrew at a slower pace. And hopefully much more will be retained. We also have language labs that we've added in both Greek and Hebrew that all of our students go to once a week through their seminary career that will help them keep in touch with the language. That's their hope. So we're hoping that at fourth year they haven't lost their languages over vicarage, but will keep them and then be able to use them in their ministry. That's the other side of the coin that we're very, very excited about, that again is an interesting part of our new curriculum.
Yeah, great, Dr. Saleska. Well, I think I have just one question, just kind of curious. So with these 8 areas of health for the sort of holistic health of a person or a pastor, and now that you really have a very personal sort of understanding of all these things, what are some of the ways that you've taken any of these areas and reflected on your own life, and maybe it's raised some issues that now you've started to address? What are some of the practical ways that it's sort of...
Okay, so I don't know how personal you want me to get, and I'll see how personal. But one of the things is, for example, at Timothy Lutheran Church, where I'm a member, we have a significant immigrant population, first generation and a half immigrants from various countries in Africa. How do we get beyond pleasantries in getting to know each other? How do I actually cross cultural boundaries? That's much more difficult than I thought it was, thought it would be. And so I taught a Bible class with the number of the immigrants, and I realized about 5 minutes into it that we were like 2 ships passing through the night, that I didn't know if they understood anything about what I said, and I don't know if I understood anything they said. So the immensity of that challenge I've been impressed with. And so I keep my ear very much attuned to the presentations and the kind of discussions that we have here in our culture crossing aspect. Again, to value cultural health is one of the outcomes. Here we realize America is changing, and a lot of you will be placed in situations in which there are immigrant populations. So how do you minister to them? I'm getting kind of firsthand experience trying to do that.
Yeah.
And so some of the things that I've learned as part of this process in that outcome specifically have helped me rethink or helped me at least give some direction to how to minister to people across cultures, how to begin to at least think about that, and what are some of the things I as a Christian need to do. Another thing is the importance of relational health. I mean, personally, actually, one of the reasons I coached basketball was because after about a few years here, I started to feel the lack of the deep relationships I had developed in parish ministry, because the teacher-student relationship can be a strong one, but it's still student-teacher relationship. But if you're the basketball coach, all of a sudden you see guys every day outside of the classroom, and I actually get to spend time with them, and it's time, I think, in which you get to know guys on a deeper level through, you take road trips and you're just with them all the time and get to hear kind of the things that are on their heart. And so the relational health aspect is something that I have become very attuned to. Students, it's interesting, as a professor, you're kind of outside the inner student circles and the relationship they develop and the things that are going on in their life and all of that. So as a pastor, that same thing can happen. You really, if you are not willing to open yourself up and work to develop relationships on this deep level, you'll maybe never find out what's really on people's hearts and kind of what's going on in their lives. So that's another area that I'm trying to figure out. Okay, how do you move from the teacher-student relationship, which is an important one and in a sense always has to be maintained, but get to know people on a level that hey, you can listen to each other and learn from each other. I think that's a healthy way for a pastor to be as well. So those are just a couple of areas that the outcomes have helped me kind of think through.
Yeah, and I think it's cool just with those few, stories that you've shared, how, in order to be a good teacher, for example, you almost need to have and value that cultural health for, the Bible study. You needed to then value, understanding on their level, or with, being a professor here, again, the teacher, with that role that you play, to be a better teacher almost, you need to have that relational, that deeper relational connection. So I think it's great. That just shows how integrated all these things are.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that because they are integrated. And the more you go through the process, you see, they touch on all of these things. So the physical health one touches on relationships, and it touches on time management, for example, and it touches on inner motivation, what's kind of going on inside of you that drives you one way or the other. And you can say that with all the outcomes and the way that we're looking at them.
Yeah, and I would say, too, I've kind of noticed that the seminary as an institution has almost been paying really close attention to some of these same wellness areas that you mentioned for the formation of each student and the personal development of each person on campus. There is a high sensitivity, for cultural health. There's a wide range of students here from backgrounds, that come, as far as, you've got North Wisconsin, Midwest, and you've got guys here who are spending time away from their families in Africa studying to get a similar degree, and just the wide range of things and the steps that the seminary has been taking to promote these personal development strategies for the students. I feel like really reflected well in the way that they conduct themselves, as an entity.
Yes, good. Yeah, I want to add to the deaconess aspect because we have young women here, not only Anglos, but also international students. studying for the deaconess program. And that's a very important dynamic that sometimes gets underplayed at the seminary. But in our culture today, men who are going to be pastors need to know, okay, how do I have an appropriate relationship with someone else in ministry? Whether it's a deaconess or a female DCE or female teachers, how do I actually speak appropriately? And so having female students helps teach our males, especially maybe the younger ones, appropriate boundaries. What are some of the issues on that side of things that may go over men's head because we're kind of oblivious to certain things? How do we have appropriate teamwork relationships in ministry? I mean, those are all important things. So if you are a young woman thinking of an aspect in which you might help serve the church, I would encourage you to think of and check out our deaconess program here, because you do make a valuable contribution to our campus life and also to the growth of the church in the things that you are able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up as well. And that will probably about do it for our episode today. We just really appreciate you coming in and spending time to talk with us a little bit, tell us a little bit about yourself, and give us an insider's view of some of the inner workings of the seminary and the thought that went into these program changes, and just a lot of the decision-making and the thought and the investment that goes into this kind of thing is hard to overstate. And so we appreciate that view and that input from you. And
You're welcome.
We look forward to continuing these conversations and interviews with other members of the seminary community as we just try to give a picture to of the seminary to the people that would like to see it. Thanks, and we will talk to you next time.
All right.